So what does it mean to be on your Grizzly? It means hard work, dedication, and it means progress beyond your Grizzly. Hard work, dedication, and progress.
I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. And if you're busy making moves, say it with me. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. I'm on my Grizzly, y'all. I'm on my Grizzly. And if you're busy making moves, say it with me.
Coming to you from the City of Angels, this is the Grizzly Podcast with Irvin Scott and Melissa Santos.
What's going on, everyone? This is Irvin Scott.
What's up, and Melissa Santos.
This is the Grizzly Podcast, and this marks the very first episode of the Grizzly Podcast. So it's only right we do it in a very major way. We've got a special guest joining us today. He is a very one-of-a-kind individual. He served as the executive producer of WCW. He's also the host of the 83 Weeks podcast with Conrad Thompson, and is the latest inductee in the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2021, Eric Bischoff.
I love you people. You people. How are you? Glad to be here.
We're doing well. Eric, thank you so much for joining us on the show. You're our first guest. This is exciting. We're happy to have you here.
This is a weekend of firsts for me. Haven't had one of those since I was 16.
Oh man.
Yay.
I had the opportunity to be on the debut program on a radio station in Tampa. So I was excited to be there first, and today I get to be your first. I'm kind of feeling like this is my new career.
I think this is it.
Your new gimmick.
You know, the Grizzly Podcast is basically a show that just highlights and focuses on people that are constantly on their grind. As the kids today would say, you stay on your Grizzly.
I like that. See, I learned, this is one of the reasons why, Irvin, I was so excited about doing this show with you and Melissa, because you and I got to hang together in LA a couple of weeks ago. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity, by the way, if I didn't thank you enough already. But I could, you're young, you're in the middle of it all. You and Melissa, you got a feel for that younger demo that I haven't seen in my neighborhood in a while. And, I learned something as a result. Every day I try to learn something new. Sometimes it's a new word, sometimes it's a new idea, whatever. And today I've learned what Grizzly means to the younger demo within a pop culture context. And I'm forever grateful, and I'm going to be stealing it because it'll make me seem cooler by default, thanks to you two.
Now, seeing what is happening in your career, man, you've accomplished so much already. But let's talk about this latest induction. You're going into the WWE Hall of Fame. You're finally being acknowledged for everything you've done in this business. How are you processing this whole thing at this point?
And I'm not kidding. I really do try to learn something every day. And sometimes it's just being aware of myself and changes in the way I think or feel or perceive certain things. And I always thought, wow, if that day ever comes, that would be really cool. I'll be very proud. True. But I had no idea that it would make the outpouring of positivity and support and all the great comments that people have made. And there's been too many of them for me to keep up with in social media and so forth. I didn't realize how it would really make me feel. It's a very unique feeling. I can't describe it to you, but it's overwhelming in a positive way.
Did you feel it coming in any way?
Melissa, I'll be completely honest with you. There were all these little dots, these little moments that have occurred over the last couple of months. As we started getting closer and closer to WrestleMania, I noticed the frequency of the reach outs from WWE started becoming a little bit more frequent. And then a couple of weeks ago on one of their shows, they surprised Molly Holly, who was the first inductee of this year's 2021 Class Hall of Fame. And I thought, well, that's a really cool way of doing it. And then when I said that to myself, I realized that on my calendar, I was supposed to do a podcast with WWE the following week on a Wednesday. I thought, there's a dot, there's only two dots, but if I connect them, I see a picture here. So I kind of had a feeling. I wasn't sure until I was sure. You know what I mean? And for me personally, that realization, the reality of it, didn't hit me until I was doing that podcast. I'm not going to suggest to you I didn't have a pretty good idea before, because I did. But it wasn't real to me. It was just in my head. Once I heard Corey actually say the words to me kind of in a public forum, all of a sudden then that reality became so different to me. And the first time I heard somebody else, you know, not a part of my family or a friend or somebody in social media, but actually somebody from WWE, you know, in public, you know, going, congratulations. It was like, oh, this is really cool.
You know, I saw the reaction on After the Bell with Corey Graves, and it was very emotional for you.
And I did get emotional because I'm an emotional person. You know, I jokingly said I cry at Disney movies, but that wasn't a joke. That was the truth. Now I'm just super grateful. And, you know, one of the things I did up this morning, and this is going to make me sound like a wrestling super fan, which, by the way, is a badge I wear proudly, because I think professional wrestling in our culture is a much more important thing than people sometimes give it credit for in different ways. But I got up this morning and I was looking at, you know, who are some of the people in the WWE Hall of Fame? I actually started feeling a little unworthy. It's like, wow, I don't belong in the same conversation as that guy or that woman or that person. I mean, it's like, whoa, it's pretty awesome. You know, I wasn't a wrestler.
But you totally 100% belong there.
I think the Hall of Fame is made for everybody that was involved in the business. That's what makes the Hall of Fame so special, because it doesn't just incorporate wrestlers. It incorporates people behind the scenes. And you've done so much for the business, whether you want to say that you did or not.
You brought who you were to the table, and you made wrestling better for it.
It was a lot of fun. I'm really grateful to have been on that journey, and I can't wait for the next one.
I'm going to throw this in right now, Mike.
That is awesome.
You're an innovator. And it's incredible to see that you continue doing things and you're non-stopping. You're in that grind and you're an inspiration to other people. Like, we got to keep up with you. So tell us what else you have going on that, you know, you want to share with us, and how you stay on that grind. Like, how do you juggle everything and stay, you know, I guess, cool with the cool kids?
Well, I was, you know, jokingly at the beginning of this podcast, I said, you know, I don't get people like you in my neighborhood because, you know, you're young. I'm clearly not. And if you lived in my neighborhood, well, it's not really a neighborhood the way most people think of it, because I live out in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. So if you got your binoculars out and you looked at my next door neighbors, so to speak, down the road, you know, they're all, most of the people that live in the area that I live in are one of two categories, either really, really young, or retired or on their way to it. So, you know, the 25, 35, 40-year-old demo that I think you guys represent, yeah, I don't get to interact much. So I interact, or I try to discover new things through social media, through a lot of podcasts lately. I've been really, you know, even though I've had one for 3 years, I haven't listened to a lot of other people's podcasts just because I haven't been able to kind of carve out and dedicate the time to it. But as I'm discovering more and more really cool information from people like you, your demo, your age group, that are on that cutting edge and living in pop culture where I don't, it opens my eyes to those things. And then I see possibilities. And when I see possibilities, I get excited. And that's just part of my nature. I've been this way since I was 5. I've always been looking for that exciting thing to do or to achieve or to acquire. And by the way, I don't mean necessarily just physical things or monetary things, but I've always been looking for that next thing that kind of gives me that surge of mental adrenaline. And, you know, great podcasts are a great inspiration for that type of thing. And you learn, you know, I get exposed to things that 2 weeks ago I wasn't exposed to, that are really interesting to me. So I think if you just, for me, if I stay engaged, I kind of open up my mind and kind of put myself in the state of, okay, I'm going to absorb some information. I don't have to agree with it all. I don't have to get excited about it all, but I got to kind of hear it to sift through it and see what's out there. And it's like every day is, bam, whole new world, whole new bunch of podcasts, whole bunch of, you know, smart people coming out with smart ideas. Not every one of them is interesting to me or right for me, but some of them are. And then I just kind of follow that path wherever it goes. Sometimes it goes nowhere. Sometimes it takes me somewhere. As far as things that I've got going on right now, you know, other than the podcast, I'm working on a film project for Netflix with a guy by the name of Todd Phillips, who directed The Last Joker, and the guy who wrote The Last Joker, or co-wrote with Todd Phillips, Scott Silver. It's in its early phases. You know, it's well along the way. We've been working on it for a while, but kind of waiting to see when COVID restrictions lifts and we can start making movies again. So we're just kind of on standby right now. But that's kind of a fun thing because, once again, perfect example. I'm learning, and believe me, I'm not a hands-on dude in this thing. I've kind of put some of the pieces together at the very beginning, but I get to be a fly on the wall. I get to see things and watch things develop and grow and build. As a fly on the wall, I get to see that, but I'm not just watching it for entertainment. I'm learning something along the way. I'm learning a lot along the way. Not that I'll ever be able to use any of it in my day-to-day business, but to have more knowledge and exposure to any form of the entertainment industry, I think is a valuable asset for me. It's like going to 2 years of college to me. So I'm digging that. I've got a couple other projects I don't really want to talk about too much, and I don't want to sound like a tease, so I'm going to leave them out of the equation. But I've got 2 or 3 other projects that are kind of like the movie deal. I always look for things I've never done before. Those opportunities go to the top of the list for me. I don't get excited about doing things I've already done. I get excited about learning and doing something I've never done before. So I've got about 2 or 3 of those on the back burner.
From developing a game such as Ninja Star Wars or writing your own autobiography, for stuff like that to happen, how does that come about?
You know what? That is the $1 billion question. And here's what I'm learning. As recently as this morning, I was thinking through that very question. Not the same way you phrased it, but essentially the same question. Which is, you know, how do I get myself excited about an idea, or why do I get myself excited about an idea? And when should I do something about it? Because for someone like me, who is an idea junkie, I love thinking about new ideas. I love hearing about other people's new ideas. I just live in that world. That's if there was an idea porn channel, I would be at the idea porn channel. I would have a problem with it because I love ideas. And my challenge, Irvin and Melissa, in my life has been picking the right idea, not just going after every one of them that excites me at the moment, but analyzing which ones appeal to me, why they appeal to me. And now, as I'm finally, 65 years old and figured out my shit, I'm beginning to recognize how to marry those ideas to my personal characteristics and my goals, because goals change. My goals when I was 45 at the height of WCW were much different than my goals today. And I have to be aware of how my goals shift on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis in order to match myself up with some of these opportunities that I get excited about. Otherwise, I'm getting excited about something that really doesn't fit my personal pro forma, if you will. And it's a bad idea. It's a waste of time. It won't be positive in the end. Nothing will happen. I won't see it through. Whereas now, when I get excited about something, I kind of do a little bit of an internal audit and go through the list, first analyzing, why am I excited about this idea? What is it? What really is it? And be very honest with myself about that. And then start looking in the mirror and going, okay, how would this idea, if it plays out and you decide to engage in it and invest in it, time, money, or otherwise, how will that fit my personal life today, my goals? And if I can make those things fit, or if they fit naturally, boom, off to the races. Now, in terms of how do those ideas get my attention, honest, Irvin, that really was your question. They blindside me. As long as I'm exposing myself to those things, the right ones just kind of slap me up against the side of the head. I don't have to they find me sometimes more than I find them.
The fact that you have your family with you, you have Lori with you, you have your kids, are they very strong supporters of everything you do?
My kids, especially my wife, have always been massive supporters of mine in anything I did, whether it was a really, really good idea or a really, really bad idea. They didn't discriminate. They just supported. But honestly, Mrs. B, my wife, Lori, and I, we often just riff. It's a term that musicians typically use when they just jam and get together and just try to create music, which is music is nothing more than energy. Music is a very harmonic, controlled, manipulated manner in which vibrations reach the mind and the soul. Not to get too goofy on you guys, but music is just energy and vibrations that put you into a certain mental state. It either makes you want to dance or, if it's a soundtrack to a movie that's designed to make you weepy, it affects that part of your brain, but it's all vibrations. And sometimes Mrs. B and I we did this morning again. She had a particular challenge on a project she was working with, and over coffee, we just riffed, much like I think musicians sometimes do. And not that I am one. No, not. But I understand the theory of it all. And we just get together, start riffing, bouncing ideas. She'll hit a couple chords. I'll hit a couple chords. She'll find a beat. Maybe I'll tweak the beat a little bit. And before you know it, we're making mental music. And in her case, that mental music came about in the form of a solution to a challenge. But the process of making that mental music, for me, is what I imagine the process would be like for a group of musicians who just get together and say, all right, I have no idea what we're going to do, but let's make some music together. Let's figure out something that sounds and feels good to us. And that's what Mrs. B and I do a lot. Conrad Thompson, my partner in the podcast, is someone who increasingly I've found over time, he and I have very similar characteristics in many respects, but we have complementary parts of our personalities that are different. And that's perfect, man, because you don't want somebody just like you to riff with, or you're going to come up with the same good ideas and the same bad ideas. But if you riff with somebody that you really have a lot of respect for, that has that same kind of drive that you do and vision that you do, but maybe looks at it from a slightly different, more pragmatic angle or a practical angle, all of a sudden that idea that I had that I thought was a great idea that ultimately would have been a bad one can become a great one because you're surrounding yourself with the right people that vibe with you.
Fair enough. We asked you earlier about your reaction to the Hall of Fame induction and all that. So any idea as far as who's inducting you into the Hall of Fame? Any names come to mind?
Yeah. No, there has not been any conversation yet. I think, I know what I've got my plane reservation. I've got my hotel reservation. I know what time the car is picking me up at the airport and dropping me off at the hotel. I have all of those details, but in terms of the format and what's going to happen, I think some of that is still being developed. Keep in mind, COVID restrictions and the fluidity of those restrictions and what can be done and can't be done. Those things kind of change on an hourly basis. So I think there may be still some planning going into that process. That's just a guess based on little bits of information that I've heard and read, but I don't know what that plan is like yet. And here's the deal. Anybody that I would, want to induct me would be more than capable of getting up there and doing that job with 5 minutes notice. So it ain't that big a deal.
It doesn't really matter because it's about you in that moment. It would be amazing if there was just because we can create in our minds I want it to be like this, I want it to be like that, but that just causes anxiety. It's kind of just good to live in the moment.
You know what else I really like about what you just said, Melissa, is and I interpreted what you said a little different maybe than you said it or you meant to say it, but what you said to me is about managing expectations. And sometimes I think, I'll just speak for myself. I always have to remind myself to say that, because just because it works for me doesn't mean it works for anybody else. But I've learned that by not having those types of expectations, who's going to induct me? What are they going to say? That's a level of expectation that you point out is to a degree. Yeah, it's anxiety because you got to worry about it, think about it and whatever. But for me, I'm going to show up. I'm going to get on I know what time my flight leaves here. I know what time my car is going to pick me up and get me to the hotel. I know what time I'm going to go do what I'm going to do. And I know it's going to be a great feeling. And I don't really want to think about it much beyond that. I don't want to plan my speech. I don't want to think about anything other than getting there and enjoying the freaking moment of it. Yeah. And without any expectations, because I know if I go into it with that mindset, whatever reaction I get is going to be far more than I anticipated.
Oh my, I'm so excited for you. Like just hearing you say, well, I got my hotel, I got this, like that's going to be such a phenomenal moment for you. Just knowing that this is happening and that we talked about it before. Now I'm going to be like, okay, well, now we need to know who's going to be up there presenting. I feel like I'm a little bit of part of it in a way now. Like,
well, you are, and you will be.
Not to put myself over, but I'm just going to say, wow.
I'll do it. Do it.
We talked about this moment, and now he's living that moment. So.
Hey, for whatever reason, we're supposed to be conditioned, or we're conditioned to feel guilty about putting ourselves over. And
but it's also because I'm a ring announcer and on-air host. Like Tommy Dreamer once told me, he's like, your job is the most important, unimportant job ever, right? And I'm like, I thank you, Tommy. I'm not sure how to take that, but okay. My job is always just to hype you up and be loud. And as you can see that, and, talk with my hands and do all that stuff for you guys. But also I am a performer as well, but I perform almost for you guys, right? Like through you guys, my performance exists. So, I try not to put myself over too much, because it's
let me comment on that if I can, Melissa, because I kind of disagree with you.
Okay.
A little bit.
Let's make some mental music. I like that. We're flowing.
And I think I know what Tommy meant. And because I've said similar things in different contexts, but if you listen to my podcast, or anybody listening to this has, you may have heard me say from time to time that I think the play-by-play and color commentary is one of the most important aspects of any show, because they have a very specific job to help shape, form, and move the narrative along while simultaneously promoting what needs to be promoting and checking all the other boxes that need to be checked in terms of acknowledging what's coming up next and what's coming up in the main events and all. There's a lot of traffic cop duties as a play-by-play announcer. But their primary job is to create a narrative. And by creating a narrative, they're advancing the story. They're helping to build anticipation. They're bringing reality to the moment, maybe surprise if necessary. And yes, even in some cases during color and play-by-play, there's action on the set. What you do as a ring announcer, and what every ring announcer does, and if they don't know they're doing it, they should look at themselves and their job a little differently, Melissa, because what you're doing, if a professional wrestling event, a live event or televised event, was a movie instead of a wrestling event, if it was a feature film, that ring announcer, in some cases, could be the very first character you see in the very opening act. And as that character, I would imagine in any scene that would make sense to me, at least, part of your job is creating anticipation. You're creating your own narrative by your energy, by the way you carry yourself in the ring, by your talent and ability to convey to the audience that you're excited about what you're about to announce. That's as much a part of the art form as anything else. Now, it may not be the most important. It may not be what everybody focuses on, but it doesn't mean it's not a critically important part of the presentation. So there you go.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this around on you now, since we're making mental music. This is how critically important you are to the business as well. Because I know you mentioned earlier, like, I don't know if I had the feeling of, hey, do I even belong there? And I guess maybe it's a similar feeling as well, right? Just maybe kind of like your feeling, except, I'm not Eric Bischoff. I'm just going to say I'm still Melissa Santos. But, I just think, again, it comes from a place that we are all important. We're all part of like this puzzle that is like wrestling, right? And entertainment. And then we all just kind of bring in our own piece of everything. I mean, and it comes from everything from a podcast. Is it anything that celebrates the art And yeah, man, but thank you. I love that. I love that you said that. I'm going to take that with me. I'm still not taking a bump though, but whatever, Cool,
You know what?
man.
That's okay.
I have taken them in the past. I actually started.
That just makes you the smartest person in the room.
I know.
So as soon as the Hall of Fame induction is over, what's the first thing you'll do?
My wife and kids are going to be there. Mrs. B, my daughter Montana, our son Garrett, and his wife Mary Jane, and they live down in Tampa. So we're going to make a weekend out of it as a family. I don't have any hard plans, I haven't made a commitment to anything or anyone beyond showing up for WrestleMania, of course, and the Hall of Fame festivities included therein. Beyond that, anything I do will be with my family. And we haven't really we'll probably eat a lot.
That's a good idea.
No, you know what I might do though, now that you gave me a good idea. See, this is why I like talking to people like you guys, because you give me ideas. You're fresh, you're young, you're new, you're on the edge. Like everything that I said at the beginning of the show is true, and you just proved it. So what I'm going to do, Irvin and Melissa, is when you see me get that ring, I'm going to put it on and I'm going to say, I'm going to Ken's Sushi Bar on Gulf to Bay Boulevard in Tampa at 3:00. And if you're there, you can offer to pick up my sushi tab.
And then everyone's going to end up there. That's probably not a good idea. You're going to end up having an impromptu signing there.
That's amazing. I love it.
So that's good sushi. I'm going to have to write that down.
Get it, Ken's Sushi. If you guys are in Tampa, I'm telling you.
Like, I'm about to. Right?
I am a sushi freaking snob. I've eaten some of the best sushi in some of the best sushi bars all over the world, including an extensive tour or 10 of Japan. I know about sushi, and Ken's Sushi is, in my opinion, just my opinion, the best sushi in the state of Florida, if not one of the top 10 places I've ever been in the top 5 places I've ever been in the United States.
You have it. The endorsement.
Shameless
for
plug.
Sushi. That's it. And that's all going down April 6th, which is a Tuesday this time around, right?
It'll be WrestleMania week. So there'll be things going on every night leading up to WrestleMania. I think I can safely say my participation in WrestleMania will take place on Sunday. So there you go. That's all I know.
Okay.
And I know, oh, by the way, and I know I'm supposed to bring a tux and a suit.
I was really surprised when they made the announcement for the NWO last year. You should have been a part of that class as well. I mean, obviously you're getting your own induction this year, which is amazing. But when that first happened, or when you first heard about the NWO going in for the class of 2020, were you kind of shocked or surprised that they didn't mention you as part of that group?
All right. I'm going to respond under one condition.
Sure, go ahead. Yes.
No follow-up questions from either of you. Okay? At some point, Irvin and Melissa, maybe even on your podcast, I'm going to tell you a very interesting story about that no one but a small handful of people know about. I'm going to leave it at that. That, my friends, is a tease.
What's next for Eric, man?
I think there's a real good chance shortly after WrestleMania. This is a project we've been talking about. It's been in discussions for several months now, but I think it's finally coming together and becoming more than just an idea. It's become kind of a crystallized plan to write another book. But this one's going to be completely different than anybody would expect it would be. And I'd be writing it with a very accomplished and successful author. So that I'm pretty sure is going to happen, and we'll be when it does, and when we're sure, we'll announce it. But I would bet money on that one. That's the next big thing. And I've got my fingers in the collectible card game world. I don't know if you know anything about that world, but it's an amazing business. And it's emerging still. It's been around for a while, but it's really beginning to emerge differently. So I've got my fingers in that pie, and I'm working with a team of people who are kind of if you were an old baseball fan from the East Coast, you would recognize Murderers Row and what I mean by that. But we've got executives that are on board with this project, and we're kind of excited about that. Now, the book, I'm going to be doing another one, but it's going to be a little bit different this time. A unique perspective on the wrestling business, completely unique from anything that's been written before. That'll be fun. Beyond that, man, I'm just taking one day at a time, as they say.
Being that this is the Grizzly Podcast, and we mentioned earlier how the show basically just highlights people that have been on their grind constantly. If you had any words to say to anybody, any upcoming entrepreneur, anybody that's just motivated and goal-oriented, what kind of advice would you give anybody that's just trying to do something?
You know, I posted something on my Twitter feed today at Bischoff. It was a picture of a leopard, reaching up and grabbing, a meal, so to speak, a bird out of thin air or out of the air. And it was such a dramatic picture. And to me, when I saw that picture, the first thing that came to my mind was the word commit. Whether you're a prey animal like a leopard trying to grab dinner for the family, or whether you're a young entrepreneur, or whether you don't even know you're an entrepreneur yet, you're just a young person with ideas, or a middle-aged person with ideas that's never really gone after them. I think the word that comes to my mind first and foremost, and maybe it's advice or maybe it's just something to write down on the back of your hand, is commit. Don't be afraid to commit. Don't be afraid to fail. Commit to your passion, commit to your emotion, commit to knowing what you don't know. If you don't know how to completely execute something, that's okay. You can be a successful entrepreneur without knowing everything you need to know by finding the right people to surround yourself with that can fill in the blanks, kind of like Conrad Thompson does with me, as I explained earlier. Put the right people around you in your orbit, whether to motivate you spiritually or as an entrepreneur or as an athlete or someone who wants to train physically to run a marathon. Whatever your goal is or your dream is, find the people that can help you get there, that you enjoy working with, and freaking commit to it. Because I think fear of failure and self-doubt probably craters more good ideas and more entrepreneurs than just about anything. I've said this before, man, the worst ideas in the world that I've ever heard are the great ideas that were poorly funded or didn't have the resources. And it's not just about money. Sometimes the resources come by way of people. Oftentimes by way of people that are in your orbit, or you can induce to be in your orbit. Don't be afraid to fail and commit.
Well said. I agree.
I'm going to take that one step, maybe not further, but maybe a little deeper, is not only do I not fear failure, I'll learn from it. Failure isn't failure to me. Failure is an education. Uh-huh. If I fail at something because I thought I did everything right, I thought my instincts were correct, I thought I, put all the right pieces in place, and it just didn't work, I'm not going to say, shit, that didn't work. I'm angry. I'm embarrassed. I'm not going to say that. Now, what can I get out of this? What information, what experience, what knowledge do I have because of this thing failing that I didn't have before it started? Because that's the value in that exercise. It's just a learning experience. That's all it is. And if you can really believe that in your mind, that failure isn't failure, it's just an education, you're going to move on to the next project with even more artillery in your ammo box than you had the first time you tried to cross the river. If something fails, don't wait for 6 months to start trying to figure out if there was anything good that came out of it. Just pull that dead idea off the back of the truck, throw it in the dirt, tear it apart, immediately and figure out what you can extract from it that has value to you. I know that sounds kind of graphic.
No, but it is. No, it is. It's not morbid at all. There's always something you can extract from a moment, from your failure, and go, okay, how could I do this different, right? Or maybe that failure, it just wasn't meant for you. Like that thing wasn't meant for you, right? Whatever maybe I think also from, a perspective of like looking for this specific job, like you just want it so bad and you're like, oh man, I really want this, just didn't pan out. And you feel like, oh God, I sucked at this, right? Well, I mean, even though you felt like you were amazing, you're like, I did the best I could. A lot of times it's just that's not your journey. It's not meant for you. It's time to move on to the next thing. It's time to move on to the next idea, move on to, something different. And I feel like once you get to that thing, you appreciate it more. I don't know. I too. I do. You appreciate it. You're like, gosh, man, like this was so worth it. And a lot of times people just give up after a failure. Most times they do. They're like, oh man, I just give up. A lot of times even, and I'll bring it up because during COVID, we saw a lot of people, gosh, man, I can't do anything. And then we also saw a lot of people like yourself who rerouted their efforts and started creating something different. Like, okay, well, I can't, there's variables I can't control, but I can control this. You can control how you decide to look at a failure. And sometimes you just have to kind of just focus on those things that maybe didn't work out in the past and go, look at this. And then great things come from it, creative ideas, whatever it is that you're working on right now that you can't talk about fully about Netflix, and all these other things. They all come from they come from not giving up and looking at a failure as like, a win in a way, a dissected kind of morbid thing, I guess, in a way that you pull apart and go, okay, well, this was good. We're gonna transplant this. We're gonna transplant this liver, and we're gonna use it later. You know what I mean? That's what you meant, right? So I think that's incredible to look at things that way because a lot of people don't. You're incredible. So, and I think that is a perfect example of like dissecting and then transplanting in a way.
Can you imagine all the people that are just tuning into the final moments of this show and they're thinking they're listening to a breakdown of The Walking Dead? You're not. We're not in a gross room right now, guys. Don't worry. I know it's weird, but yeah, we're definitely. It's not The Walking Dead. It's the
Grizzly Podcast, FYI.
Podcast. We're on our Grizzly. Okay? This is what we do. Oof. And I know me and Irvin, we came together. I mean, and it's good to say that we're both incredibly passionate individuals. This is how we just kind of came together. How we met, and I think it's nice to kind of just throw out there. And I know we're interviewing you, but just kind of throw out there how we all met. I also met Irvin at a meet and greet, probably the same meet and greet where you guys got to hang out, and then it just turned into something more and something incredible. And I guess it was incredibly meant to be. It's
good vibrations.
Yeah.
Good people, good vibrations.
And 83 Weeks podcast, man, that's a very successful podcast right now.
Yeah. I mean, when we record the podcast, Conrad and I produce it much like we're doing this podcast for video as well. And we provide that video behind a paywall over at adfreeshows.com. So you get the podcast with video without any commercials. Some people like that. Some people like it a lot. There's so much great content over there. We are actually, I guess there's a couple 100,000 people that have, platforms on Patreon, or channels, I should say, on the Patreon channel. Well, ours is called adfreeshows.com. And of the hundreds of thousands of channels that exist on Patreon, we're, I think, number 50 in terms of revenue. And we've got over 3,000 subscribers. I call them family members because they really are. We do a lot of interactive Zoom chats and things like that. So you can find me and the podcast in video and a ton more over at adfreeshows.com. Yes, that was a shameless plug, but I feel no shame.
There you go. Make sure you guys check that out. From meeting you to now doing the show and now finally doing the first episode with Melissa, you have no idea how much this means to me. I mean, Eric, I grew up watching you, man. I was like 11 years old on my television watching TNT. I was flipping the channels back and forth. My mom telling me, go to bed, man. You got school the next day. And I'm watching Nitro, man, and all the exciting things that were happening. Eric, we thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for opening up and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. And you've been incredibly inspirational.
Thank you guys very much. This has been a blast.
Yes, with that being said, this is the Grizzly Podcast. We want to thank again our guest today, the latest inductee in the WWE Hall of Fame class of of 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up one more time for Eric Bischoff.
I'm going to go get my Grizz on. See you guys.
Hey, Eric Bischoff here. I want to give you guys a heads up. Check out the Grizzly Podcast
with Irvin Scott and Melissa Santos. This is the Grizzly Podcast.
Yo, turn it up.
Hard work, dedication, and progress. Stay on your Grizzly.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking out another Grizzly Podcast episode. We'll see you next time.